audio by Raising Free People Network.
I'm Akilah S. Richards, grief literacy educator, longtime podcaster, here to explore what we lose individually and collectively when we fail to name grief as part of our everyday life. Grief isn't just about death, it's about endings, expired relationships, outgrown roles, identities and dreams we released. If we tend to grief in its diversity, we can expand our capacity to navigate change, to hold space for each other, and to move with more presence in a rapidly shifting world. This is What I Let Die podcast, where we move from grief struck to grief tending. What happens when we stop avoiding grief? Let's find out together. Hey, you. Welcome back to What I Let Die podcast, the space where we push back on the idea that grief only belongs in crisis moments and cemeteries. Last week's focus was about the concept of identity deaths, the process of losing, shedding, or outgrowing parts of ourselves and the grief associated with that. I talked about how identity deaths can be something we choose or something forced, and that they're often invisible, but yet they really impact us. And our identity in relationship to our job or the work we do in the world is also subject to grief. So let's talk about it. There's this grief that lives in us, not just because of what we lost at work, but because of what we were never allowed to protect. As I was feeling through what I wanted to share in this episode, this is one of the first sentences that came through me. I'm going to read it again because as I was typing it out and letting flow everything that came from that, the sentence itself just offers me a type of grounding and guardrails in a sense for me to hold on to as we move through this. So I'm going to repeat the sentence in part for myself, but in service of what I want to share. So there is grief that lives in us, not just because of what we lost at work, but because of what we were never allowed to protect. You know what I'm talking about? Like the morning energy that went to meetings with people who don't know how to say our name right. The things we sacrificed because we needed that job to keep whatever health insurance or the asthma medication for our kids or our family member stocked up. The passion project that got permanently paused because the bills got to be paid. The moment you realize that the work that once felt good, that lit you up, doesn't anymore, but you're in too deep to walk away. Because when it comes to our work, our jobs, we're supposed to be grateful because we are still employed, because at least we got benefits, because it's a good job. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something that I know. A check don't cancel grief. A check don't cancel grief. You can be fully paid and fully heartbroken. You can be on salary and still mourning the version of you who dreamed of more freedom than what you have. That's grief. And it doesn't always come with a casket. Let's talk about the grief of fawning. 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 In I Let It Die, my grief tending course, one of the people in our spaces shared that They had spent a lot of time fawning. They talked about fear and fawning. Oof. And that really sat on my chest for days, because if you know what it means to work while fawning, you know that grief is present in our work, and not just when we're laid off or released. It's there in every over-explained email, every ignored boundary, every time you smiled and nodded at a joke that didn't actually feel safe. Fawning is a trauma response. It's what we do when we think that shrinking ourselves might keep us safe. It's people-pleasing turned into a survival strategy. So at work, fawning can show up like saying, "Of course, yes," when your body was screaming, "Hell no, no." Fawning can show up like never using sick days. Fawning can show up like going above and beyond for a place that wouldn't flinch if you disappeared tomorrow. And yes, there is grief in all of that, deep grief, because the version of you who kept quiet to keep the peace may need to be released. They may need a burial. That might be what you need to let die. And then there's the grief nobody talks about, the grief of building something with your name on it, of launching the dream, starting the business, wearing all the hats, and still feeling like you failed because you are exhausted, or the bills aren't being paid, or the thing you love is now feeling very much just like another job. Do you hear me? I have been there. I come in and out of waves of grief with my life design as an entrepreneur, for sure. Lots of joy, freedom, connection. I do work that I love. And there's plenty of grief in the exhaustion and the differences in when the money is flowing and when the money is just funny. And a realization that I had around this is that entrepreneurship ain't gonna save you from capitalism. This is me talking to me. Entrepreneurship didn't save me from capitalism. Sometimes it just gives me front row seats to how deep the conditioning runs. Like how I keep going back to business training, business coaching type shit that really I know in my heart and soul will never align with how I flow and what I am. That's something that I am unlearning. But becoming an entrepreneur, while I suspected it would bring me a lot of the real sense of liberation that I experience, what I didn't account for are the types of grief. And maybe as an entrepreneur, you're recognizing that too, that sometimes entrepreneurship really just gives you an uninterrupted view of how deep the conditioning runs, how hard it is to uncouple our worth from our output, even when we're the one calling the shots. So yeah, this ain't even just about employment. It's about work as we've come to know it. Work as survival, work as performance, work as identity. But what if all of that is dying? And it's not a rhetorical question, because for many of us, that's dying. And what if it needs to die? Here is my invitation for you this week. It's a question, as always. What jobs, what roles, what performances have you been holding on to because they made you feel safe, even when they were no longer aligned? Or maybe they never were. And what would it look like to grieve those losses, even if nobody claps, even if nobody understands, even if nobody agrees? What would it look like to grieve the losses of the jobs, roles, performances that you've been holding on to because they made you feel safe? And you ain't got to quit tomorrow. but you can stop pretending that it doesn't hurt. And that is the purpose of this invitation, this inquiry, not so that you drop everything and burn all the bridges necessarily, but just so that you can stop pretending that it doesn't hurt. Let's talk about that quiet grief so many of us carry. The kind that's not about a person, but about the possibility you had to put down. Like maybe you planned to take some time off. Maybe you wanted to spend some months or even a year writing your book, building your things slowly, traveling with your kids. But the money said, nah. The healthcare system said, absolutely not. Capitalism said, unless you can monetize it, that's not feasible. That's not smart. That grief. Or your life design being shaped by systems that do not care if you are well, spending your time, energy, effort sitting in traffic, going to a place that you have to bring so much of yourself to that doesn't care back about you. That's not small. That's not selfish. That's sacred grief. It is, and we're not going to ignore it. And let's not ignore this one either. As I am talking to you and looking at my notes, there are so many different types of grief that are just like pushing their way through to come out of my mouth to share with you right now. It's like I open this portal around this type of grief, and all the different versions of it and iterations of it just are like me. So this has been a very interesting episode to record because so much keeps coming up even as I am sharing what I jotted down to work from. So here's another one that just pushed its way through. The grief of leaving a job that you actually liked. The space felt right. The work was meaningful. Maybe you were good at it. You weren't bored half the time. But then something changed. For some folks, it's like you needed to be a caregiver for maybe a parent, an aging parent, or a sibling. And that job is just not a good fit anymore. The hours don't work. The level of energy it takes doesn't work. The leadership shifted. The schedule no longer works for your life. Maybe you evolved and the job didn't. There is grief in letting go of the good to make space for your next true thing. Because it's not always bad job equal I gotta leave. Sometimes it's good job equal not aligned anymore. And that's an example of complex grief. And it doesn't do well with trying to be explained tidily, not even to us. But you can acknowledge it. And here's one more piece. We've been taught to relate to each other at work like we're machines in parallel, not humans in connection. This is something I learned as an unschooler too, because work mimics what we learned in school, where we are, just like at work, machines in parallel, not humans in connection, which means we compete and we compare and we do not grieve together. We perform resilience near each other. When someone gets fired, for example, if you hear about it at all at the job, you hear about it often through a group email. When someone's breaking down, we say, oh, take care of yourself, girl. We keep it moving. When we're the ones unraveling, we try to hold it in until Friday night or PTO. But grief don't clock out. Grief does not clock out. And pretending otherwise costs too much. It costs too much. That's why I want us to start asking different questions about ourselves, about our relationship to work. Just like in Grief Circle, I host this monthly Grief Affinity Circle with a yoga and wellness space that has an in-person campus and also a virtual online studio. It's Kripalu. And we start often with a question that I learned from a bereavement coordinator that I support here in Atlanta. Instead of how are you doing in relation to grief, she says, how are you holding up? And I add to that question, also, maybe how are you not holding up? Different question. It invites something so different. And so I want to offer you 3 questions that you can use to start relating differently and inquiring differently to yourself and to others. So these are questions you can ask yourself, and they're also questions you can ask other people. And they are, how is work showing up in your body lately? How is work showing up in your body lately? Another one, what did you have to put down just to make it through this week? What did you have to put down just to make it through this week? And a third one, what version of yourself is still performing because it doesn't feel safe to stop? What version of yourself is still performing because it doesn't feel safe to stop? And these are not mere questions, as you might have picked up on. They are grief rituals in disguise. They are little doorways into self-tending and self-soothing. So here is what I want to leave you with this week. There is grief in being employed. There is grief in being unemployed. There is grief in being self-employed. There is grief in questioning the whole damn setup. It's all valid. It's all worth naming. And it doesn't need to be tidy or timely or solved necessarily. Just faced. And this is what we do here over at What I Let Die. We slow down long enough to say, yeah, that hurt. I deserve to say so. And what else is it that you deserve to say or want to be witnessed in terms of your relationship to grief and work? Let's talk about it. Come on over to radicalselfie.org/wild, where you will find a short postmortem about each episode, as well as the link to the chat room inside my circle community, where we continue this conversation. All right. So next week, we are going to be talking about grief and parenting. Oh, so much to say about that. Join me then. And in the meantime, thank you for listening. Be sure to rate this show wherever you are listening to it. It really helps. I'm so grateful for space to explore this sort of thing. And I also will be sure to put the link to the Grief Affinity Circle that I facilitate each month over at Kripalu, so you can check out that space. The online studio offers so many different points of care in relation to our life, our wellness, our sense of connection and community, and of course, our grief. Shout out to Kripalu for trusting my particular way of supporting grief tending. So it may feel good to join me over there, and I will make sure the link is on radicalselfie.org/wild. Peace. Be easy. Take care of yourself.
This episode is part of a multi-episode series that serves as a public, free grief literacy project called What I Let Die podcast. The show is co-produced by Akilah S. Richards and Kate Umstatter-Thompson. Show art by Chris Richards. Much of the content comes from or is inspired by Akilah's Grief Tenders course, called the Eyelid Course, an acronym for I Let It Die. Show notes and resources are available at radicalselfie.org/wild. Share the show with friends and be sure to rate the show wherever you listen to it.